This is Beyond the Margins, where we go deeper into story, creativity, and the courage it takes to speak your truth. Join host Jen Chambers each week for writing inspiration, conversations with creative minds, the yearly 12-week Artist Sway series, or the Write Your Story series, all designed to help you find, shape, and share your voice. Because your story doesn't end on the page, it begins beyond the margins.
I'm very excited because I'm able to have an interview for you guys with my friend Ardean. Ardean is a student of mine in one of my podcasting classes and a friend. And her episode today is about her idea for a podcast that she came up with after taking one of my podcasting classes. It's absolutely incredible, and she's a wonderful person with just a really interesting vision. So I thought you guys would like to hear that today. And also hear kind of a little bit about some of the things that I work on in my podcasting classes. Enjoy. Thank you. And thank you so much to Ardean.
Hi, I'm Ardean Maxey, and I had an idea of a podcast that would be aimed towards people my age. And because, as I was saying to a friend, it dawned on me that the two groups in our culture that seem to be the most isolated, and because of the isolation, the most depressed, were the young and the elderly. Everybody else in between has things to do. They have contacts, they have community. And the depression and the isolation in those groups are caused by different things, but the results are the same. And I thought that remembering my own childhood and my life and where I am now, what keeps me up and going is community. And podcasts are a great way to build community and connection and interest and joy and excitement and all those things that give us reasons to get up in the morning, other than our cats. And so that's what gave me the idea of a podcast. And then so I was told that we should do a podcast on what we know, what we're expert at. I know about getting older. I'm expert at getting older. I was born in 1944. I'm 81. I'll be 82. And I have a favorite quote, and it's from the Once and Future King. The best thing for being sad, this is Merlin that's speaking, is to learn something. That is the only thing that never fails. And I have found that to be true throughout my life. And so I end up doing things that I stick with at times because I'm really good at it. Then I try something new that I really am terrible at. And so I think, well, that was interesting, but I'll leave that to someone else. And I have no idea how to reach people in my group as far as actually doing a podcast. But it might be as successful or futile as a writer trying to get published. I don't know. But you don't know if you don't try. Some of the things I'd like to talk about in my podcast would be fun things like what do we all remember from our childhood. I remember cars with running boards on them. My dad would pull into this long, long driveway, and the kids would run out, jump on the running boards, ride down the driveway. I remember when the first Frozen TV dinners came out. We were so excited. It was so cool. They were terrible, but we loved them. And especially the little plop of chocolate pudding in there, really yucky. But we ate it and we loved it and we enjoyed it because it was so new. And, we dressed differently. Our entertainment was different. Our food was different. And so now we have very slowly evolved into existing 60, 70, 80 years later when everything is different than it was when we grew up. But it's fun to get together with people my age when someone will say, Do you remember the phone? It used to be a party line. And we'd sneak over and we'd lift it and we'd listen in, and we could hear what was going on up and down the whole country mile. And I remember the things we did. I grew up on a farm, on a ranch in the San Joaquin Valley. And going into town was big excitement. And so it was, I think about those things. That would be a fun aspect of it. I think about, I would love to do a podcast on adapting to change. And the idea with change is that it's inevitable. And there's some change that I just hate. But I'll come back to it later on and I'll go, yeah, but if I accept that, then I can do this. And frankly, I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost family members. I lost my husband. Terrible change. But your life changes and you adapt. And you find, not replacements, but you find other things to do that bring you joy. And the alternative is depression and quitting and dying yourself. And I'm not ready to do that until I'm ready to do it. So I've always tended to be a bit of an independent person. And I don't like people telling me what to do. But if I get around to it, the same thing on my own. And so I would love to do a program on change. Again, I wrote something down from the class, and it was a script template. You want to hear my script template? Okay. Welcome to the Old Lady Podcast. That's just a title in search of a better one, probably. The show that helps us truly live our ongoing chapters of our ongoing lives. Today we're digging into or out of our daily, weekly, monthly ruts, the lifelong habits that promise to bury us way before we're ready to go. Our guest is Dr. whomever, Susan Smiley, a renowned psychologist specializing in the various aspects of change. We'll be talking about how to deal with it, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to use and perhaps even glorify the opportunities that change brings our way. And if we continue to do the same thing the same way, we ourselves don't grow, we don't change, we don't adapt. And life gets really dull and depressing. And it doesn't have to be. I would love to interview people. I haven't done a lot of research into this, and it's going to take a lot of research to find out who's out there, who would be great to talk to. I'd love to do another show or a podcast on the way that certain people have lived their third and fourth chapter of their life. Maybe they went from being a high-tech CEO and retired and turned into a very happy, successful Pop Warner football coach. Volunteer work has a great lot of things to offer. And I generally enjoyed my volunteer work more than I did the work I got paid for. But so I'd like to find out who created these. There's got to be more than just Grandma Moses. Who created these successful chapters? Were they writers, artists, musicians, teachers? I had a friend years ago that when she retired, she joined the Peace Corps. She spoke several languages, so she went off to different countries and taught English as a second language. What a great thing to do. And so there's all kinds of things out there, and I think the more we hear about them, the more we'll start to put together ideas of, oh, that sounds great. What could I do? I just came up with an idea. We could do a podcast at the Senior Center. And I think people are curious, and if you bring it right into their living room, the senior center, we go over there at lunchtime, and we could do something like that.
Like recording today.
And could print out little cards, perhaps, that said, if you want to hear this podcast, you can go to such and such and tell them how to hook up to it. I think most people have computers. I don't know. But the library has computers. They can come in here and watch. I find that interesting too when I talk to people my age. I can converse with them easily and use shortcuts because we all grew up using the same words. And I must say that I've not kept up with that because I will listen to kids on a bus or something talking. I have no idea what they're talking. I started to realize I was getting older when I watched the Academy Awards and realized I don't know any of those people that are up for awards anymore. I used to know everybody, had seen all the movies, so forth and so on. And then after a while, it just wasn't that important to me anymore. And I did not keep up with current culture. I think that's an important thing to try and keep up with current culture, but we don't always make the connections. And I know that the further apart the elders get from the other generations, everyone loses. I remember my great-grandmother, and she lived into her 90s. And I remember some of the stories that my great-grandmother and my grandmother told me about the San Francisco earthquake. And because they were living in Palo Alto at the time. And one of the daughters, that would have been my great-aunt, her husband was in the city during the earthquake. And he was a musician. All he saved from his little apartment was his horn. Nothing else mattered. He grabbed his horn. And if you're not in connection with all of the generations of your family, you lose out. People don't write letters anymore. They just text or send an emoji. I'd rather hear somebody, the timbre of their voice, and when they say, I love you, I don't want to see a little heart stuck in my phone. Oh. So I think that we need to keep the channels open between generations. And I know you know that with your mom. And I think we're both were blessed. I was blessed with an extraordinary mother, and you are, and Dad. And we would just sit around and talk. My dad would tell me these fantastic stories about Prohibition time in Michigan, which just happened to be a very short flight. He was a pilot. He flew a little Jenny, an airplane, a biplane. And he would just happen to fly it into Canada and load it up with very legal in Canada, really good Scotch whiskey, and fly it back to the hotels in Detroit. And breaking the law, yes. Enjoying every minute of it, I'm sure he did. So I wouldn't know those things if generations of people don't talk to each other. The funny part of it is that my wild and crazy father then moved to California and married a very strict Methodist daughter. So enough love, I think, to go around, but I don't think my grandfather ever knew all the stories about my father. I think that was probably a good thing. I remember living way out in the country that my brother and sister taught me how to print my name before I went to school. Because the library in town, you had to be able to print your name to get a library card in the children's section. And so as soon as I could do that, It was one of the most exciting days of my life. And I went with my brother and sister and mother, and we went to the library, and I got my library card. And I brought all kinds of books home. And from that time on, the library, any library, anywhere, it's become my favorite place. And now the library is expanding and growing and changing with change. It's not just books. You can do podcasts now, and you can get digital things here, I'm sure. And I rather read than listen, so I've never checked out an audiobook. But they're great for people that drive long distances. Can't imagine a community without libraries. People like to chat. People like to share. My major in college was anthropology. And it's always amazed me that it doesn't matter what human being lives where. We all need the same things. We need shelter. We need food. We need safety. We need connection. We need community. And we all develop it in different ways. I don't care if you're living in a castle or a little grass shack somewhere. That's shelter. We all fulfill our needs differently. But we don't do it alone. So I think that community it's in our DNA. We're tribal. We have to have each other. And I'm very sad to see what happens when we go without community. We need our machines, but we certainly cannot replace each other with machines. They're just a tool. My dad was kind of an innovator. He always had ideas before they were even workable. And they were talking about being able to reach kids way out in the Alaskan tundra, whatever, and how to do that. And he was talking about this 50, 60 years ago. And of course there were TVs then. And there was not any Zoom. There were radios. Everyone kept into contact. And they never quite came up with the right connection to do it, which of course now they can. But I think that now we have connections with people. Thank goodness for the technology. Didn't have it then. I love history. And I think about those pioneers that got on the covered wagons back in Illinois or wherever and said goodbye to their families, knowing they would never see them again. They would have letters back and forth occasionally, probably couldn't pick up a phone, couldn't take part in Zoom. And I thought, how did they do that? The courage and the conviction that they had to be able to do that. The parents being left behind knowing they'd not see their grandkids. When my husband was in Vietnam, the only way we had to really communicate was either an arranged phone call, and that would take practically an act of Congress to get, letters. Now the letters I've kept, and my son has all of his dad's letters from Vietnam. But I used to think, when the wars were going on in the Middle East and such, I thought, well, you know, the wives can sit at home, and they do, and they Zoom every night. And I thought, that's really nice, but everything changes. I had a dear friend, she was a mother of a friend of mine, and she said, in her later years, she said, I just think we're supposed to have fun. At first, you know, I was a little stuffy about it. I thought, oh, we're supposed to accomplish great things, and we're supposed to do this and that. And then I'd come around to Ruthie's way of thinking. I think we're just supposed to have fun.
The story